Good evening, everybody. I have 6 o'clock. I'd like to welcome everybody to the April 24th meeting of the New Bern Board of Aldermen. Tonight, the prayer will be given by the Reverend Robert Johnson of Ebenezer Presbyterian Church. Reverend Johnson, thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, for this opportunity to come and to give the prayer for this great meeting. Shall we bow our heads? Gracious, loving God, our Father in heaven, we thank Thee for this lovely day which You have made. We thank You for allowing us to pause from our daily, busy, personal schedules to come to this holy place, the City Hall, to engage in the business of this great historic city. We thank You, dear God, for the leaders that You have called together to represent this great city and the citizens of this great city. And Lord, we brought You here with us, so we invite You to have Your way within this meeting and within each one of us. Lord, search us, and if You see anything, dear God, that may be in the way of us doing the business that You have outlined for us to do here as a people of faith, remove those things and refill us with Your love, Your peace, and Your unity, that we might do the work that has been signed to do. We thank You and we praise You for all that we will attempt to do here this evening. And when we leave here this evening, dear God, we want to leave here more united and dedicated to work together and to serve this great historic city in a mighty great way, so that we all may live in harmony and peace with one another, and above all with You. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Bingle. Here. Alderwoman Harris.
Present.
Alderman Astor.
Here.
Mayor Outlaw.
Here.
Alderman Kinsey. Alderman Best.
Present.
Alderman Odom.
Here.
Okay, the first item of business tonight is the consent agenda. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at it?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the consent agenda. Is there discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, the same. The next order of business will be item number 6, the city manager's presentation of the fiscal year 2018-19 budget. Do any of the aldermen have questions or comments before we start that? Okay, at this time, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. It's that time of year again when we as staff put together our budgets and bring it before you and allow the opportunity for the board to take a look at it and add anything that they wish to do over the next year, fiscal year, which will be our fiscal year 19. And Chrissy has handed out the presentation to you that I plan on presenting tonight. You also have a copy of the entire budget before you, and that is for your use tonight and for the next several weeks while we move through our budget season. And I want to highlight some important dates moving forward. But we'll go ahead and get started. So tonight, the presentation, I'm going to go over the methodology that was used to bring us to the point where we are today with a balanced budget to present to you. We're going to go over the highlights of the proposed budget, not necessarily department by department, because that is specific to when we have our work sessions in a week from now. And we're going to go through the historic trends, showing kind of what our different enterprise funds and general fund balances are doing as far as our expenditures and revenues. I've got some board considerations, a little bit of change this year for the board to consider and think about as we move towards our work sessions, about things that y'all may want to do as opportunities to generate revenue or do projects that you see fit with our city. And also I'll wrap it up with some conclusion and answer any kind of general questions and comments that you may have. We'll obviously get into a lot more detail with our budget once we get to the work sessions a week from now. Each department will go line by line, or pretty much line by line, in their budgets and detail the highlights specifically per department. So that's when you'll have an opportunity to really ask more detailed questions of the department head and myself and the budget team. Excuse me. Continuing on with a little bit of the methodology, we have an executive budget team that's used, and the board, at the board retreat, we've kind of get some direction from you all to determine how we want to move forward with presenting this budget to you. As you can see, myself, our Assistant City Manager, Christy Kohler, the Director of Finance, Mr. Sabatelli, Director of Human Resources, Sonia Hayes, Lori Mullican, who is our Senior Accounting Manager, and Devonna Short, who is the Financial and Budget Analyst, are all part of this budget team. The budget presented that you'll see tonight maintains our current level of operations. We'll also present options to recover the cost for sanitation services towards the end as a potential for us to generate some additional revenues and look for ways to fund larger projects. But ultimately, what you have before you tonight is a balanced budget that is kind of the status quo, carry on as we've been carrying on, making sure that we meet the level of service that we need for our citizens without having to raise any kind of rates or fees at this time. So, continuing with the methodology, we ask the departments generally around January to start, well, they usually start before then, late winter. They start thinking about a lot of the different things that they've got, capital requests, getting quotes, things like that. But ultimately, January is whenever the finance department issues out the spreadsheets for them to begin populating their different requests, as well as their personnel matters and operational budgets. And we submit those out where we can allow them the opportunity to make requests, but also identify efficiencies within their operating accounts. We as staff or the department budget team, we look at the capital projects very heavily. We vet those depending on what the requests are, because ultimately, especially in the general fund, you know, we've got multiple departments requesting, and we obviously only have a limited amount of revenue, and we're trying to do more of a pay-as-you-go approach as we move forward with capital purchases. Revenue increases. Obviously, we saw both sales tax and ad valorem tax increase based on some of our growth. That was kind of anticipated, and we did realize that based on the projected numbers that we're seeing the year-end at, as well as the ones we're seeing with the future projections from the state of North Carolina that they distribute to us typically around the end of March. Is that correct, JR? Yeah. And so we formulated and put all of that stuff into our budget as well, and that's where we generate a significant amount of our revenues. One thing that we also wanted to do, as you'll recall, we had our retreat. We had individual come help us with our kind of some strategic goals and objectives. Kind of outline those down below in red. So with alignment of our Board of Aldermen strategic goals and objectives, we have tried to include those as much as we could in the budget. Those are investing in our staff, ensuring public safety meets requirements, enhance parks and recreation opportunities, maintain fiscal responsibility, invest in our city infrastructure, and promote economic development. And you're going to see that as I move on towards the next portion here, which is kind of highlights of the budget with regards to where we're meeting those individual goals and objectives. So with regards to personnel, investing in staff, maintaining fiscal responsibility, you're going to see here, and like I said, this is a kind of a 50,000-foot view of this budget. Obviously, we can get into as much detail as you wish when we get into the work sessions, but the fiscal year 19 budget has a net increase of only one position. We actually have two positions that are being added. One of them is a fire inspector due to the increased inspection demands we have with regards to our fire inspections and keeping up with those. Additionally, we're adding a substation technician in our electric department. We have some major projects that are getting ready to happen with regards to our substations and the workload, and continuing to make sure that we have backfilled positions as people go through attrition and exit out of our system. We want to make sure we have skilled and trained labor following up behind them. So one of the positions we're adding is substation technician in the electric department. We're not going to backfill one of the administrative positions in the water department due to some of the consolidation that you will be seeing over at the water plant with the completion of the new water resources facility over there.
Mr. James Holmes,
Sure.
does the board, as far as the way we want to run through this, do you want to stop if you have a question, or do you want to wait till the end of the presentation?
Well, my question is, I know this is an overview. This is like your executive summary, pretty much. But then during our work sessions, we're going to individually go through these, correct, and then be able to really ask detailed questions and talk to the department heads. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So let me just kind of talk about what we typically do with the work sessions for those who are new members of the board as well. When we have our work sessions next week, we're going to have two, at least two. If we need more, we'll do more. But typically we go through the general fund organizations the first night. We go through the enterprise funds and organizations the second night. We generally look at and have each of our department heads come up, as well as myself and the assistant city manager and finance director will all be sitting at the table, working through this. You're welcome to ask as many detailed questions as you want to about every specific item of that budget that you wish. We also, at the end of those meetings, we've typically been allowing an opportunity for the public to make comment on the specific items that we've discussed that night. So if we discuss the general fund first night, we'll allow them for any kind of questions or comments that the board may that the public may have of the board or of staff. Generally, we allow opportunities for them at that point once it's presented and they get to hear all those different department requests. We do the same thing for the next night when we do the enterprise funds. And once again, if we run out of time and we need more time, we can obviously establish more dates. We have two built into the schedule each year for the board meetings. But if the board wishes to have some more, we can do that.
Okay, so I would rather, instead of belaboring this process, hear the executive summary and then let us sink it in, and then we can come back for questions.
Sure.
I think that would be the best thing we can do.
Okay. So we've also just some internal movements that we've had, not necessarily adding more positions, but we've done some realignment of two positions within Parks and Recreation facilities, and we moved them to Parks and Rec administration. Mr. Hughes has come in and take a look. He took a look at the organization and wanted to do some realignments there so that he has some oversight with regards to some of the programming that's going on within the Parks and Recreation department. Reclassification of two positions, one in public buildings and Parks and Recreation administration, due to the additional workloads that the employees are doing. The realignment of 5 positions from water to sewer. Oftentimes we have, depending upon the types of projects that we have scheduled throughout the year, the water and sewer staff are somewhat interchangeable because they can work on water, they can work on sewer, so oftentimes we kind of mix and float them between the departments. So if we've got more sewer projects one year, then we may put some more people allocated towards the sewer department because they're going to be needing to work on those projects or these rehab projects. Merit-based salary adjustments are also proposed for qualifying employees. Qualifying employees meaning those that deserve to be given raises based on their performance. So it will be a performance-based salary adjustments. Those would become effective if the board so chooses to approve the budget, July the 30th of 2018. So as we move through this and we're getting towards the end of the fiscal year, we'll be doing the performance evaluations of our employees so that we can have all of that input into our HR system so that it takes effect beginning the end of July.
I do have a question about that.
Sure.
Why not July 1? Why July 30?
It's just it's a little bit more difficult for us from a inputting into the system standpoint, as well as getting 460 evaluations completed of all of our different staff, especially given, let's say you were to push the budget adoption until the first meeting in June. We've got to get all of the accounting set up. We've got to get all of the stuff inputted so that we can continue our operations effectively beginning July 1. So we typically, oftentimes in the past, I mean, I've been here for a little over 7 years now. There's been times where we've done half years that began January. We've done some that started in September, but I've tried to incorporate those to be as early as we can, and that basically is that's 11 out of the 12 months, essentially. As you can see here, continuing our personnel, investing in staff, and maintaining our fiscal responsibility. We're trying to maintain pretty even keel with regards to our positions. The positions that have been added over the past 2 years specifically have been due to growth needs. Last year, I think it was in Mr. Ruggieri's Department of Development Services. We added building inspector there. This year, we're adding a fire inspector because of our increased load on our fire inspections. So we have a net increase, as I said earlier, of one position within the entire operating funds, being the electric, water, sewer, general fund, and stormwater. Moving to public safety, obviously ensuring public safety meets the requirements and maintaining our fiscal responsibility, investing in our staff. It took us a while to catch up with regards to our police vehicles and making sure that we're keeping good vehicles on the front line for our public safety. This year, we've got a request of 10 new police vehicles in fiscal year 19 in order to remain on the sustainable replacement schedule, so that and we kind of have an informal, I guess, policy per se now of vehicle replacement specifically for different types of cars and equipment that we have in the system. Obviously, you want our ones responding to emergency to be operating functionally well whenever they're called for service. So we've been trying to replace our police vehicles, and where possible, we may roll those down to admin cars. Fire department training and inspection emphasis and continued execution of our strategic plan that we completed in the fire department. And as I said, we've added an additional fire inspector to carry out our increasing inspection requirements. With regards to parks and recreation and enhancing our opportunities throughout the city, we're looking at a renewed emphasis on maintenance and improvements for parks, ball fields, playgrounds, recreation centers, and taking care of basically the stuff that we have now. That's very important. There's been some areas of neglect over the years, and what we're looking to do is between Parks and Recreation staff as well as the public buildings. I know Matt's staff has been very vital in improving some of our existing facilities, our dugouts, our bathrooms. They did a complete overhaul of the bathroom down at Union Point Park, which was the interior was in pretty poor condition, and they're doing that across the board, a lot of our different parks, and helping out in that way. Funding for special recreation activities and youth sports. Foster's got some great new ideas and initiatives that he wants to incorporate, and making sure that we're reaching out to our citizens the best that we can, providing recreational opportunities and enhancing those throughout the city. We're looking at some outdoor pickleball courts. We've had a lot of interest with pickleball courts throughout the city. We're utilizing existing aged tennis courts, and we're going to probably resurface those and fit 4, 5, 6 possibly courts on what would be 2 tennis courts typically. So Foster has had opportunities to do this from some of his previous employments, and is kind of versed in having the ability to do this in-house. Now, whether we have the ability to do it in-house or not, he's going to have to investigate that, but that's something that we're going to look at. Major Kidsville renovation. As y'all probably saw, the Kidsville has been shut down for the time being until we can get some repair work done. It may be that we're able to find some money in the budget this year to get started, but ultimately it may require us to do some more. For those who aren't aware and haven't been to that facility, the Kidsville playground is essentially built out of wood, and it was built in the late 80s, is that correct, Foster? And so obviously that's been quite some time, probably pushing close to 30 years, and that's starting to weather and age pretty bad. So there's a lot of improvements that need to be done to try to bring that into compliance and safe for our citizens. Additionally, we're going to begin implementation of the Martin Marietta Park Master Plan. We've spoken to you and brought things and items before you already with regards to our part of funding and going after that grant through the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund. So that will be coming before you additionally and showing you some of the things that we're planning to do as far as the phasing of Martin Marietta Park. With regards to our enterprise fund, we want to maintain our fiscal responsibility and once again invest in the city infrastructure. Right now, we are proposing in this budget stable, unchanged utility rates from fiscal year 18. I will say that there has been discussion at NCEMPA of a potential electric rate increase that would be passed along through our wholesale cost. When we buy it from Duke Energy through electricities, they pass that the additional cost down to the municipalities. If that happens, we would find out probably somewhere around January, and it would take effect for us in April. So at that point, we would need to evaluate based on what those projections are, whether or not we need to look at any kind of increases to pass along to our customers. Trent Road substation rebuild, that's one of the large improvements that we need. We've got some aging infrastructure over on Trent Road at the substation we have. It's probably our oldest substation, 1960s equipment. So we have that rebuild scheduled. Continued Township 7 and West New Bern improvements. Those are big capital projects that we've had ongoing. We're going to also continue our AMI implementation. I will say that we've made a tremendous amount of progress this year. I think we're about, Jordan, 85% on the electric side and about 60 on the water. It's close. So we're moving along pretty good on that. Additional water sewer system improvements have been funded to the tune of around 200 in water and 250 in sewer, 250,000 in sewer. Vehicle replacements and obviously moving to the new facility for water resources. Additional city improvements we've included in the budget, maintaining our vehicles and equipment to provide support for the city and our operations, replace aging equipment and vehicles in predetermined replacement cycles. I talked about that with the police cruisers. And then we want to continue our focus on projects that were begun in fiscal year 18, that being the Craven South Front Street development that we've been looking at with the Development Finance District folks from School of Government. The Bolt Center, that's moving along quite well. We've got the plans submitted. They're out to bid right now. The contractor has been calling with a lot of questions. Due date on that bid, Mr. May 9th. So we should be getting that relatively soon, find out what our bids are for that. Train Depot project is currently under rehab construction. They're doing some interior, actually it's more like demolition right now due to the rot and the age of the facility. So that's ongoing. And the Guy and Dunn Street railroad crossings, the Guy and Street crossing is complete. And the North Craven Street crossing is scheduled with DOT in North Carolina, actually that would be Norfolk Southern Railroad this year. And just so you know, we have some minimal investment in anytime they do those railroad crossings. Typically, they're a match, 80-20, I think is that right? Or is it 90-10? 90-10? Yeah, 90-10 is the match on that. So we have some responsibility with that. I think it was $25,000 was our responsibility for the funding. With regards to transportation, we've put $800,000 in the budget for various improvements to city streets and also Lawson Creek Park. If anybody has rode to the end of the boat ramps at Lawson Creek Park, obviously we've got some issues with some settlement there and some severe alligator cracking. So that's one of the areas that we need to address. Street survey has been updated. I have some fantastic news on that. The efforts that we have made over the past several years have greatly impacted our score. We were about an 81 as far as an overall street rating system. We're now at an 85, which is far better than most municipalities based on the consultants' recommendations and overview of other municipalities throughout the system or throughout the city. I'm sorry, the state. And so that's a fantastic thing. However, I will say that streets are a continual aging process, and you have to continue to reinvest in those. So we do have that new street survey. It has identified the maintenance activities that within all of our streets, and the recommended activities that can range anywhere from full depth repair, resurfacing, crack sealing, as you see there. Obviously you want to use the right application at the right time to extend the life of your system, and we try to do that based upon traffic volumes and the actual need and condition of the street. We've also budgeted additionally $85,000 for sidewalk maintenance throughout the city. It's very important for us to have a walkable area in our community. Obviously, we put a lot of focus in that in our handicap accessibility ramps that we have at our interchanges, as well as throughout the city as far as fixing some of our trip hazards along sidewalks. And actually, the past several years, we've had some larger scale projects that were funded through some Safe Routes to School grants money, as well as some DOT enhancement monies along Glen Burnie and News Boulevard to add a lot of sidewalks within our system. Not many municipalities can boast that we have handicap accessible sidewalks all the way from the westernmost section of town, which out towards Derby Park, where you can actually make it all the way into downtown through handicap accessible sidewalks and almost traverse our entire city limits if you go the right route. So just as an overview, this is all of the different funds that we work with. As you can see, it captures the general fund, water, sewer, electric, stormwater, all of our different smaller funds, which are community development, emergency, E911, our benefits insurance plan, grants, MSD, which is basically the downtown district, any kind of partnerships or police special revenues, capital reserves, all of that stuff is captured in here to come to our total all funds budget, which recommended this year is $124,999,852. That's an increase of only 1.91% over last year. Just to show you some historic trends, right here is this is the trending line for our general fund revenue and expenditure. A lot of this is captured through, as you see, some of those anomalies that go up above. Those were years which we spent some money in capital, where we ended up the years spending a significant amount of some fund balance. If we were up, I think one year we were up close to 50% on our fund balance, so we spent that down to actually do some large projects throughout the city. So as you can kind of see here, it is trending upward, but as are our revenues as we're bringing in and growing our town through economic development. You kind of see the inverse of that with our water and sewer funds. What you're seeing is our revenues kind of continue to go down. You'll see some of those, the quick dip anomalies there. Those are when we did some rate reductions. As you see, it's kind of starting to stabilize itself. The only issues that we're seeing specifically to water and sewer is conservation through low flow toilets and faucets and things like that. So the consumption is not as much, yet our costs are going up. So it kind of starts negatively impacting us with regards to our rates in our water and sewer funds, because through conservation we're not selling as much water or treating as much water, but then it's costing us more to do the business. So that's one of the things that's kind of difficult whenever you're looking at any kind of water and sewer fund options. Here's the sewer fund, so you can kind of see between the water and the sewer, they both kind of have that same downward trend line based on our revenues. Specifically, you know, we lost one of our larger water customers, which was Mayola, whenever they moved out, and then you know, we picked up some usage through the water plant. I'm sorry, not the water plant, but the energy, Craven Wood Energy. So we've kind of bounced a little bit of that stuff out, but ultimately the trend lines still reflect the conservation over time. Here's our electric fund. You'll see the significant dip. That was the year of the asset sale, as well as the other couple rate reductions that we did prior to the asset sale and then post the asset sale. As you can see, this year it kind of trended a little bit upwards. Oftentimes we base that upon weather predictions over a period of time, and also preparing ourselves for any kind of issues that we run into throughout the year operationally, and capital projects. So that's also included in this larger sum number. far as an ad valorem tax rate comparison, we tried to take a look at some of our benchmark cities of Greenville, Goldsboro, Kinston, Washington, Havelock, Wilmington, and Wilson. As you can see, we continue to be significantly lower than the majority of those. I will say that I believe Kinston's proposing an increase to go up to 70 cents per hundred this year. Some of those were adjusted relatively recently. You see some there in 2016, which is Wilson, New Bern, and Havelock. Obviously, those Havelock and New Bern both being in Craven County. We pretty much all of Craven County did a revaluation that year. And you'll see that Wilmington also has done a reevaluation just recently. But as you can see, our estimated valuation, our estimated collection percentage remains high. It's consistent with and one of the higher ones of all of our different peers. And our estimated annual ad valorem taxes, as you can see, kind of fall in line pretty closely. Obviously, I'd love to be in a better situation like Wilmington, where you're drawing in a bunch more ad valorem, but obviously they're a large population and have a significant amount of commercial growth. So the overall budget numbers and trends, what we've done here, and this kind of leads into this next section that I kind of want to talk about here, which is opportunities for the board to consider. As I said, this is a budget that's presented, that's balanced. It continues our operations to meet our customers' needs without doing any kind of increases, rates, or fees at this time. There may be some small fee adjustments you'll see whenever we bring you the charges for fees and services throughout the city. But relatively speaking, with regards to our different funds, the water rate, sewer rate, electric rate, and our ad valorem tax rate, those are left unchanged. But what we've done is we've tried to set aside some additional money. We've put $200,000 into our general fund contingency. Reason being is we heard the board speak of the possibility of us looking at some debt service financing to go do some projects. So we've done we kind of cut back a little bit to put some into that contingency based on some of the decisions and outcomes we have during our work sessions. Obviously, we could reapply some of that. Typically, we carry around $100,000 in our contingency each year as a safety net if we have any kind of unexpected expenditures, or if we need to do some balancing of some sort. We can pull from contingency first, but ultimately that $200,000 is in our general fund balance left in contingency for us to use as we please. Current budget that we have does not include potential revenue changes, but we've identified some opportunities and some sources for us if the board wishes to consider as opportunities for us to generate revenues, then we can do so, and we're more than happy to discuss those. We've prepared numbers for it. 3 of those that we've identified are moving sanitation out of the general fund. Right now, our sanitation rate is $11.75. If you were to move, and I guess I probably should flip on over and talk about sanitation. So in FY19, our budgeted expenses that we had in our sanitation fund were exceeded by our revenues by almost $200,000. So what that tells you is that our taxes, our ad valorem taxes, are subsidizing the sanitation rate for the citizens. If you were to take the sanitation and pull it out into its own fund, it would be basically like an enterprise fund where your water, sewer, and electric operate from. And in order to do so, you create a balanced budget just like you do with the general fund or the electric fund or the water fund. So ultimately, your revenues need to equal what your expenditures are. In order for us to do that, and we've talked about this for years, the 7 years that I've been here, when I first got here, our sanitation rate was $4. It was costing us $5.25 on our contract per customer just to pick up the service. We were getting charged that from the user. So we weren't even recapturing our cost from the contractor to go out and provide the service. Over a period of time, we have bumped that up, and keep in mind that sanitation also includes our leaf and limb service. Leaf and limb is something that we add as a value-added service to citizens so that we pick up any kind of loose leaves during loose leaf season, as well as their limbs and shrubs and things that they may remove from their yards. So if we were to do that, you would need to adjust to create a revenue-neutral fund of about $3 to a $14.75 number in order for you to do that. In doing so, the general fund then would not be supplementing and subsidizing the sanitation fund, and it would generate approximately $280,000 to the general fund, as well as a little bit of extra money to the electric fund for the shared services, because right now the UBO, who does the billing and everything else for all of our different enterprises, as well as our sanitation, when they send out the bills, we aren't capturing any shared services for the sanitation portion of that. However, we do charge electric, water, and sewer, so obviously there would be a little bit of revenue generation for the electric department. But ultimately, that's essentially the impact to the general fund is about $280,000, and I'll sum all this up kind of. So just keep in mind, $200,000 in contingency. You've got now, if you look at this option, an additional $280,000 that would be of benefit to the general fund if you look at that sanitation rate increase. And then ultimately, the municipal vehicle tax discussion is the next item. So currently, the city charges $5 per licensed vehicle tag. This is a municipal vehicle tax that's allowed by state statute. Most municipalities of our size typically charge anywhere from $15 to $25. Some of them charge as high as $30, which is the maximum that you can go. I think Raleigh's one of those, and maybe Charlotte and some of these others that may have transportation needs, stuff like that. The first $5 you can use for however you wish to use it as long as it's lawful for government to be able to do. The second portion of this, the remaining proceeds, they must be used for either roadway construction, rehabilitation, resurfacing, and or improvements. They do have an option where if you have transportation, you can actually use the next $5 up to $5 for transportation needs, but anything above the first $5 and the second $5, if you choose to use it for transportation, has to go towards construction, rehabilitation, resurfacing, and or improvements for your system. So for New Bern, just keep this in mind, each additional increment of $5 generates approximately $125,000 in revenue. And this is paid every time that you go renew your license tag at the DMV office. You pay $5, which is a city municipal vehicle tax. And like I said, some municipalities charge 10, some have 15, some 20, all the way up to $30, which is the maximum amount the state will allow us to levy. The third item is our ad valorem tax rate discussion. So currently our ad valorem tax rate is 46 per 100 evaluation. That was changed from 41 cent per 100 back whenever we did our reevaluation. When we did so, our revenue neutral rate was 0.4618. So we weren't quite revenue neutral. So we moved it up to 46, made it a round number. That was the decision of the board at that time. So we didn't quite go to revenue neutral, but we were close. What we're comparing here is what I really want you to focus in on is the difference between the 16-17 fiscal year number as far as the sales tax share versus the 17-18 numbers. And you see that percentage go down from 19.456 to 19.166. And the reason being is what a lot of people don't understand is that our sales tax distribution is based upon the ad valorem tax distribution that the county recognizes and distributes this 3% that they get back from the state. They distribute that to all the different municipalities as well as themselves, the county, for the sales tax distribution. Now look at the county. If you'll notice that the county, their ad valorem revenue neutral rate in 16-17, the one over there to note at the end, was 0.5294. They actually went up to 0.5394, so they actually had a tax increase that year of 1 cent whenever they adjusted that rate. What happens is now look at the difference between their 16-17 number and their 17-18 number with regards to the sales tax share. So ours goes down because they had a increase in their rate, and theirs went up. So essentially, 1 cent on our tax rate generates about $310,000 of revenue. When they adjusted their rate, it cut us by about $100,000. So essentially, a 1 cent increase could potentially get us back almost $400,000 if you look at the distributions. And I'm pretty sure Havelock raised their rate, which would have also hurt us that year as well. So anytime there's a revaluation, that's one of the things that we've got to consider. Is our county or any of the other municipalities within our county adjusting it, because our cost share of the sales tax gets distributed based on ad valorem tax. So that's another option to keep in mind with regards to revenue generation if the board were to consider any kind of additional tax increase. So the board asked also for staff to kind of look at what are some of these large projects that we're working on or kind of have in the future we've been eyeing. Obviously, y'all have heard of the Oaks Road resurfacing. We did a portion of it with the wedging over where the Jack Smith Creek Bridge is from the cemetery across. To do the additional portions of Oaks Road, basically from Tryon Palace all the way out, excluding the portion that we just finished, is about $800,000 for us to resurface that road. Old Airport Road, that's one of the things that's come on your plate here recently, that we've basically agreed with DOT to do some of this widening and resurfacing of Old Airport Road due to the volume of traffic and the proximity to the school. That's about 1.3. Trent Road widening is about a $2 million project by the time you figure in the engineering costs, the widening, as well as the resurfacing in certain areas that are needed, as well as any kind of drainage improvements. Martin Marietta Park phases, kind of 1 and 2. If you wanted to go, you could go up to $5 million. I think our consultants put, a closeout cost on that of somewhere in the $10 to $12 million range. Obviously, we're going to try to mitigate and offset a lot of that cost through value engineering and some potential advertising sales and sponsorships and stuff like that. We've had some discussions regarding another fire station. You're looking at about $2.5 million on a capital cost for that through depreciation. Yearly operating costs, you're probably looking at about $950,000 closely on that. So that's something you're looking at. So the other thing there we got to be determined on is public investment for redevelopment and economic development. Obviously, we've had discussions with regards to redevelopment commission. We're seeing a lot of economic development right now in a lot of our commercial corridors. If some of that stuff comes along, we can't put a value on that because we don't know what they are. But if they are there, that's numbers that could potentially be used towards this lending. So all that totals up to approximately $11.6 million of capital cost, a recurring operating cost of $958,000. Current budget. Obviously, I mentioned, let's sum all this stuff up. So you're looking at approximately $200,000 that could be put towards the debt service. You're looking at about $280,000 would be available per year by creating a self-sustaining sanitation utility. Additional $300,000 plus that $100,000 that we lost to the county if you were to go 1 cent above on our tax rate to a 0.47 per 100. Adding all that up, you're looking close to $800,000 easily of additional revenues that we have, $800,000 to $900,000. So what we did is we've kind of put together some debt service schedules down there for different large scale amounts, say anywhere from $2 to $9 million. So what you're seeing there is year one debt. Obviously, our average annual debt service, the first years are always a little more expensive than the last years, but your average annual debt service, you can kind of see $600,000, $650,000 for $9 million worth of debt for us to take out on a 20-year term. Obviously, the first year we'll have to account for that, but it does come down over a period of time. So what I'm essentially providing here is options for the board to consider as far as generating revenue if we want to go out and issue some large-scale debt to do some projects, some of these larger projects that we need to do eventually at some point. These are some of the financing options that we see. So kind of to wrap everything up and conclude, we've got a balanced budget, no update or change to our ad valorem tax rate unless the board so chooses to fund large projects, and we can investigate that as an option. Net change of 1 employee focused primarily towards public safety and inspections. Merit-based salary increases for the employees based on performance. Maintain our high level of service to our citizens and continued execution of projects that begun in fiscal year 18. Also, we have a continuation of our utility rates with possible electric increase later in the year. We're looking at, like I said, find out what that kind of impact may be around January based on the projections that we see with electricities and Duke Progress. We would implement that April 1. We do have some rate stabilization, some days cash on hand. We may be able to absorb that from April to July. I'm not making any promises, but we'll have to evaluate that and could potentially defer that until the next fiscal year. We just have to do some evaluation to see whether that is once we know what the number is. Obviously, we'll keep you abreast of any kind of revenue and expenditures throughout the year in the enterprise funds. Capital improvement plan in place, general fund balance where it needs to be. All of our financial situations with regards to days cash on hand and our general fund balance are in great shape. We're going to end up the year this year above our 35% or right around our 35% targeted goal for our general fund balance, and our days cash on hand and our enterprise funds are well above formal requirements of our policy, specifically so that we don't trip any kind of our revenue bond covenants. We'll be prepared for any economic growth and maneuver, continue to evaluate policy revisions and ensure growth is smart. Our remaining budget meetings, so we're looking at 2 workshops, those 2 workshops being May the 1st and 2nd. I think we've made the change to do those during the day. Is that
Yes.
1 o'clock? So we're going to start at 1 o'clock. We'll run to as long as y'all want to go. Our kind of preliminary projection is to have our public hearing, and we actually had that in our consent agenda tonight to go ahead and call for that public hearing. We'll have that on the 8th of May. We're eyeing an adoption for the 22nd of May unless the board has some major modifications that we need to discuss or change as far as staff goes. And other workshops we're willing to work in whatever the board wishes to do, and staff's willing to help out in whatever way we can. So I'm happy to answer any kind of questions or comments that the board may have.
My question is relative to the public hearing for the budget on May the 8th. So if we have the 1st and 2nd, we have additional questions, whatever, can we move that date since we announced it? So it's not a problem to cancel that date and move it
You would just
later?
open it and continue it.
Yep.
Continue it?
Yep.
Okay, I have a feeling that may be too soon. Okay, thank you.
I know that we're going to ask questions in the work sessions, but just one off the top of my head. The $1.3 million for the airport road, is that in addition to what the state has given us to take over that road?
So the state provided us 680, is that right? 687, something like that, in funds. The money that they gave us was specific to if they were to go in and resurface their asset that they have currently right now and do any kind of other work that they needed to do based on the width that it is, that's what they paid us. So essentially they gave us a brand new road of asphalt for the sections that they own. Anything above that, and we can scale it however we need to, but anything above that would be our responsibility. So any kind of widening to take care of any kind of bike travel lanes or width issues with regards to passing traffic is our responsibility. And to my knowledge, that 1.3 is total, or is it, so that's the additional portion? Yeah, okay.
So to answer the question, the 1.3 is in addition to what the state has.
And that's just, keep in mind, that's an estimate. I mean, we're in the midst. I think you were approving the consultant to move forward with the design work, and obviously, yeah. So the agreement with the consultant to move forward with the design work will be on the next agenda. But ultimately, we can value engineer as best we can on that, and try to minimize what our impacts are, and that would be some of the charge of the consultant moving forward.
And the $2 million for the Trent Road project, are we getting any reimbursement at all on that?
Not specifically on that, because that was the Trent Road was tied to the Alfred Cunningham Bridge deal.
It was tied to what?
Tied to the Alfred Cunningham Bridge swap. So we took over multiple roads within the city's corporate limits that were owned by DOT in exchange for them taking the Alfred Cunningham Bridge, which was committed to by the city some time ago.
Thank you.
And Mark, we don't have any, that's just a preliminary estimate. You haven't done any engineering work on Trent Road at all, correct?
That's preliminary estimates, yes, sir.
Because there's only like 3 sections
Yeah.
that are not 3-laned already.
Some of the issues that preliminarily we have run into on some of the other projects is the drainage and the utility, under utility. We have, on several occasions when DOT owned it, had to come in and move some of our utilities so that they could do some of the work that they needed to do. So that's some of the things that we're kind of trying to expect for this particular project. But yes, preliminarily, Those are based on some numbers that we put together, engineers' estimates, I guess if you want to call it that. It would be our hopes, obviously, that they would come in lower. And those do have contingencies built in, as well as the consulting engineering fees.
Other questions? I know that when we first discussed the AMI implementation, we were looking at, as I recall, a half a day employee, and I know that's changed a little bit. What, I know that in looking at the water and sewer department, when the full implementation takes effect, were we not looking, when we originally decided to spend that kind of money, at there were going to be some jobs not needed because of the computerization of the system? And what year would you be looking at that? Full implementation was going to be about December of 19, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, actually, it's we're hoping December of this year is what we're hoping as far as the implementation. And Jordan, you may want to come up, but I'm thinking, Mayor, that with regards to the water and sewer maintenance activities, I'm not so sure about a tremendous amount of loss of employees or reduction in employees in that particular area. Now, when it comes to the meter readers and things like that, due to the automation of the system, I think we definitely could reevaluate and look at some savings there. But Jordan, you may want to add.
And I think we've already made some reductions in our meter reader staff through attrition as those positions have transitioned from traditional meter readers to meter technicians. As some of those folks have moved on for various reasons, we have not backfilled some of those positions. So I think through attrition, we've already reduced that number in our utility business office staff by a certain number. Off the top of my head, I honestly don't remember what that is, but that was the reduction we were looking for. So that you don't need the folks going out and physically reading those meters every day, but you still need a number of those to be technicians, because now you have mechanical devices that still will give you trouble from time to time. So we've transitioned our meter reading staff to be meter technicians, and we've also reduced that number as we progress through the AMI implementation.
And I think, JR, correct me if I'm wrong, quite a few of those have, basically we're using temporary staff for those hires now instead of full-time employees.
That is correct. So that way, when the AMI implementation is completed, we don't have to worry about laying off employees because they're not our employees. Technically, they're temporary staff members.
The other thing, I want to just make sure we were on the number on the POW funds, because I think we absorbed about 13 total miles of new roads with the bridge situation. And so part of that swap was the fact that we were going to be picking up some more mileage, but I don't see any additional revenues coming from POW funds in your budget.
The
And I know they've
POW bill
done-
fund's always a difficult one to project, Mayor, and because a lot of it gets distributed based on, the formulas get distributed based on two criteria. One is population, and that's the smallest one. The other one is the center line miles of the municipality. And what we can't control is the growth and development of other cities throughout the city or throughout the state, and your Charlottes, your Raleighs, all these other places that are seeing tremendous growth throughout, your suburbs of Raleigh, Apex, and Holly Ridge. And I think Holly Ridge, over the last 10 years, population grew from like 2,000 to 20-some thousand or something. I mean, it's tremendous. And so what we're seeing is it's very difficult for us to predict what that is going to come out to, as well as it being tied to gasoline sales. And the gasoline sales, it's a tax, basically, that you pay every time you fill up your car. And it's difficult to predict. I think we did see some increase, but it's 800 is our expenditure. We're actually seeing a revenue of a little over 800, I believe.
$865,000 of budgeted revenue for FY19. We're going to be bringing in $874,000 for FY18.
Yeah, so it has gone up some.
And Mark, just as a note, at the Highway 1764 meeting, which I'm representing the board on, the state talked about the fact that their gasoline tax is decreasing with the onset of more electric cars, and people are not using gas consumption as they have, they're seeing a decline in that, which has made them have to adjust their numbers. So that impact could trickle down to us. With
And there's a lot of advertising out there. I mean, many of you may have seen every time you pull up to some gas stations, I wouldn't say all of them, but some gas stations even have, what does the entire southeast look like as far as the taxes? And I'm sure at some point or another, for those who travel a lot, filling up in South Carolina and filling up in Virginia, if I can make it 250 miles across the state of North Carolina, then, they can save a little bit of money if they're real, penny pinchers. But ultimately, that does matter. And you're correct on that, Alderman Bingle, in that we are seeing, due to hybrids and electric cars, the Volts, the different things, the Teslas that are coming out, you're seeing reductions in that gasoline tax. And I think that is some of the charge of us as elected officials and working with the League of Municipalities and our local elected officials that are in Raleigh, is to try to figure out a way to make us whole with regards to these revenues, because that ultimately it is impacting us.
I think something might help us for the workshops is to get a benchmark from other cities on their trash, and because I think being in the hole about $200,000 a year on that is something we maybe want to look at our rates versus our sister cities.
Yep, and I definitely can do that. We, excuse me, I pulled that information back whenever we did the 1175 increase, because I think it went from 875 to 1175 at that point. And we're still significantly lower. I want to say Greenville's up around the $20 range, but we could definitely pull that number and have it ready for the workshop. And what I would say too is when we had the 1175, we set that prior to us receiving our new bids. I think that was last year. Is that correct, Matt? So we got new bids. Our price went up, but we didn't adjust the rate. So obviously it double whammied us. And each year within that we have a 5-year contract with our provider, and in that 5-year they have an increase basically each year. And that increase is based on economy, the CPI increases that you see across the United States, Consumer Price Index. And generally speaking, that's a 2% number, would you say, Scott, generally on CPI? So you're looking at about 2% every year over a 5-year loan. So that's 10% plus the amount our track went up. So
I knew for the new board a couple of years ago, we lost about $300,000 on privilege tax statewide. And I just want to mention that it's not necessarily a budget item, but I think in the old days, many times, Mr. Davis, I've had to contact you on several occasions when an 18-wheeler would be set up beside a furniture company selling recliners and couches and things. And I think the first thing you would, when we handled that, part of it was, did they go down and get a privilege tax? Is that not a privilege license?
Right.
We've had one similar to that in the last week or two, where a property owner sent me a picture of a 18-wheeler in a neighborhood here in New Bern with an 18-wheeler set out with furniture in a person's yard. And I'm just asking that, it's not budget related, but it is with the loss of the $300,000, that without the city doing privilege taxes now, and I know that we do have an ordinance about it not being within 1,000 feet or so, as you and I have discussed that. What police action do we have other than the ordinance itself to address that?
Well, there may be, if it's in a residential area, then there's a zoning violation. The typical problem we have, and that's the easier case. If you're doing business in a residential zone, that's the easy case. The problem you and I deal with oftentimes are these trucks setting up in a commercial district in front or nearby another furniture store. That's the tricky one.
How do you handle the food trucks then?
Well, those we do we have a process for that. We have a
So do
zone.
they pay some kind of, but what happens when they set up in downtown with other restaurants?
They certainly can, as long as they have a vacant lot that's zoned for
But
that
on the
use.
street?
Not on the
Different.
street,
They
no.
cannot do on the street. There was one there, I'm just curious, during Art Walk.
Mm.
So I didn't know what the process was for the city, how that works.
But I'm saying in the past years, we could, when the police would go out and find out they had a privilege license, that pretty much took care of it there. And now we don't have that, so we're having to rely on the ordinance itself.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I tell you, in some of my travels through the ICMA, interesting things I've seen in some of the other municipalities I've been is they'll actually have like a retrofit of an old gas station, and they'll take it and they'll make it a food truck rodeo site, and essentially they allow the sale of items at that place, keeps them off the street, gives them a place to operate. I would imagine that if the city owns it, they probably lease the space per year or whatever it is to those food trucks, and they're able to utilize that space. So that might be something we could look at, or some partnership somehow if food trucks start becoming something of need around here. But definitely I saw that in Austin whenever I was there, and I've seen it in other places like Nashville.
One thing I think there's and of course there's a lot of things going on in the city. We've made quite a few diamonds in the rough adjustments and improvements in our city, but part of that seems like last year we've had quite a few budget amendments, and I just want to talk about that for a minute as to whether or not with the proposed budget, I would assume that we, with 50% or so fund balance, now we have made ourselves a policy not to go below 25 and stay between 25 and 35, that in the ensuing year, are you comfortable that obviously we will probably do budget adjustments? Have you got that factored in? I know with your contingencies on projects and things, you'll be doing that when you...
Yeah, and most of the time, Mayor, if you recall, like a lot of our budget amendments, I mean, I ain't going to say all of them, but, a lot of them are associated with, grants that we may have matches on, where do you really want to pass up an opportunity for us to get, free money from somewhere? We have a lot of our budget amendments are tied up with that, but then, there are some other projects that are tied up with project funds, moving money for some of the larger projects that we're doing, or even some of the smaller projects, getting some money set aside through some of these budget amendments. But that's one of the ones, I guess one of the most significant ones that I've seen this past year with regards to a budget amendment was regarding some of our police personnel costs. Generally speaking, the police department doesn't run fully staffed, very infrequently does. This year, a portion of the year, it has run fully staffed, but I think you're down now, Chief, how many? 3 positions, so he's already, just whenever he gets them all hired back, he's down 3 again. So that's just the typical normal attrition that we have and movement within the police department. So, but this year was kind of an anomaly with that regard.
Mark, I have a question. Merit-based salary adjustments for qualifying employees.
Okay.
Can you explain that?
So it's basically performance-based merit increases. So those who are performing well get increases based upon our quartile system. You're probably familiar with it. The quartile system can be from 1% up to 2.5% based on where they fall within the salary ranges of the quartile system. For those who don't perform well, they should get 0%. So that's kind of left at the discretion of the department heads. Chrissy and I have had some discussions. We're looking at studying some options that have been explored in other places, like throughout the state government. I think some of the ones that you've worked with and so forth and so on, that we're looking at maybe moving more towards a hey, department, you get this specific amount, and you should do your increases based on the performance of the employees within that. And if they want to give someone who's been a super performer a little bit more, then that means other people are going to have to, suffer a little bit for that. But, me personally, I'm not a fan of the whole guaranteed 2.5% or 1% thing. I'm a performance-based guy. I think you should perform. And, just because you come every day and do your job doesn't mean that you're a superstar performer. That means you're doing your job and what you're being paid for. But that's just my opinion, and that's the way I do operate with my staff. So.
I've just heard from some of the employees that some of them only had a 1% raise, 2 out of the past 3 years or something like that.
Well, and that could be the case. I know one year we did a 1% cost of living adjustment rather than across the board for employees. That was a COLA. But depending on where one falls on the performance or on the quartile system, if they're in the top, I believe it's 70 or so percent, 75th percentile to 100 percentile in the pay range, then yeah, they would get 1%.
Well, I know we'll discuss this more, but it's some of the employees making comments that I've been working here for 25 years. I get a 1% raise. I'm the one they call on to come out to work at nighttime. I'm the one that knows the system. I'm the one that knows how to do all this. The guy that's brand new, has only been here 3 or 4 years, is getting a 2.5% raise. And it just doesn't sit well. So if you've got some ideas, I'd love to hear
That's
them.
one of the things that we're looking to explore. Obviously I didn't implement that, so, but the quartile system. But, Chrissy and I have had the discussion before the budget season. We just haven't had time to do a whole lot of research on it. But Chrissy's familiar with the system that was implemented where she was about performance-based, truly performance-based increases. I know, Alderman Odom, you work in the corporate world yourself, so I'm sure you're familiar with it. Ms. Bingle as well. So you deal in the hospitality area, so I'm sure you know based on performance that those who perform should be the ones that receive the raises, honestly.
I won't disagree with that.
Yeah.
The ones that perform, but they're also, it seems like they might be penalized because they're a senior employee.
And
that's the concern
That's
I
the
have.
difficulty of the quartile system, because the intent of the quartile system was entirely different whenever it was implemented. It was implemented because we were losing employees early on in the career after we've spent a lot of money training them and getting them up to speed for the positions they're in, and then we lose them to somewhere else. The intent of the quartile system is to try to get people up to the mid-range as quickly as possible. That's the whole reason why you have a quartile system. It gives a higher increase for those at lower wages to try to get them up to the midpoint fast.
Well, Chrissy, I'd certainly be excited to listen to what some of your ideas are on that. But it just doesn't seem fair to some of the employees.
Okay. Any other questions, comments about the budget?
I'm gonna leave mine for the budget session.
Okay.
Me too.
Okay, we're through with that. We're going to go to item number 7. Consider adopting a resolution approving the installation of additional street lights. Board, do you have questions? Had a chance to look that over?
Mayor, if there's not any questions, I'd like to make a motion, we adopt a resolution approving the installation of additional streetlights.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, let's have a roll call starting with Alderman Odom.
Alderman Odom.
Yes.
Alderman Best.
Yes.
Mayor Outlaw.
Yes.
Alderman Astor.
Yes.
Alderwoman Harris.
Yes.
Alderman Bingle.
Yes.
Motion carries. Item number 8, consider adopting a resolution authorizing the submission of a grant application to the NC Parks and Recreation Trust Fund. Does the board have questions about that?
I did.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Stevens, in this request, you're asking for the grant to be $475,000, but typically a part of grant, the maximum is $500,000. Is there a reason we're not asking for the maximum?
We have, as staff, had some discussions with some of the folks at the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund Management Group, and they have, I guess they kind of advised us or told us that, 350 to 375 is more of the range that probably gets approved. Am I correct in that, Foster? 350 to 375. I can tell you that myself, I wasn't wanting to go that low. I'm willing to work with them a little bit, but I thought it was not in this board's best interest for them to go any lower than what we have. 475, that's very close to what I think the tax value was on the property as the donation. I'm not sure. What was did you get a copy of the appraisal?
Appraisal was 1.65.
Yeah, so the appraisal come in a heck of a lot higher than what the tax value was. So $500,000 projects are few and far between as far as their approval statewide, and we recognize that. We think we have a diamond here with this particular project, and hope that we can get it. But the 350 for the amount of donation that we got, we thought was very unfair, and I didn't feel it was my place for me to say 350 was the number. I thought 475 is probably closer, but it's not the whole 500, I guess.
Okay. And then the second part of my question is, the grant requires a one-for-one match, so we're using the land value then as the match, no funds from the city, is that correct?
That is correct. The initial part of request gets to utilize the land donation. What we did is prior to this donation happening, once we knew that Marietta had interest in doing so, we requested, before we took acquisition of that, a waiver to have this property considered as our match. If you do it beforehand, before you acquire it or before you get it, then you can apply for this waiver, get it approved. That way you can use it as a match towards the 475 or 500, whichever one you go for. So to answer your question, there's no initial one-for-one match on this one. We can use the land as it was donated, the value of the land.
Okay, thank you.
When will they award this?
September, when you hear? September. Yeah, sometime in September typically.
So is this a grant that we can apply for, the Part F grant for each year?
No. What happens is you have to expend and complete the portions of the project that you have submitted prior to any further submissions with regards to Part F funding. And it's a pretty aggressive and competitive application process. Sometimes people don't get funded on the first year. They'll get funded subsequent years. So it's our hopes that this being such a huge project, we've got a great supporter with our local rep that works with Part F here that's supportive of the project. So I'm hoping that it'll get funded the first year. But typically you have to complete the project and expend all the funds as the grant has required, as well as the matches prior to you applying again.
So then when we move on to phase 2, then that's going to be strictly funded by the city?
Not necessarily. If we complete the first phase, then we at that point can reapply for Part F funds. However, the match would be our responsibility. So if we were to go for another $475,000, the one-for-one match, we would have to come up with $475,000 to be able to match it, or find subsequent donations to use towards collateral.
Okay.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that the board consider adopting a resolution authorizing the submission of a grant application to the NC Parks and Recreation Trust Fund.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Best, seconded by Alderman Harris. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, let's have a roll call, starting with Alderman Bingle.
Alderman Bingle.
Yes?
Alderwoman Harris.
Yes.
Alderman Astor.
Yes.
Mayor Outlaw.
Yes.
Alderman Best.
Yes.
Alderman Odom.
Yes.
Item carries. Item number 9, consider adopting a budget ordinance to establish the Garage Relocation Project Fund. Board have questions, comments?
No, Mayor. Well, I'll make a motion to adopt a budget ordinance to establish the Garage Relocation Project Fund.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Bingle, seconded by Alderman Harris. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, let's have a roll call, starting with Alderman Odom.
Alderman Odom.
Yes.
Alderman Best.
Yes.
Mayor Outlaw.
Yes.
Alderman Astor.
Yes.
Alderwoman Harris.
Yes.
Alderman Bingle.
Yes.
Motion carries. Item number 10, consider adopting a resolution for a declaration of intent to reimburse the Garage Relocation Project. Does the board have questions?
If not, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a resolution for declaration of intent to reimburse for the garage relocation project.
A second?
Is that Alderman Bingle?
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion by Alderman Odom, seconded by Alderman Bingle. Is there discussion? Seeing none, let's have a roll call, starting with Alderman Bingle.
Alderman Bingle.
Sorry. Yes?
Alderwoman Harris.
Yes.
Alderman Astor.
Yes.
Mayor Outlaw.
Yes.
Alderman Best.
Yes.
Alderman Odom.
Yes.
Motion carries. Item number 11, consider adopting a budget ordinance amendment for the General Capital Projects Fund. Does the board have a chance to take a look at that? Does the board have questions?
Mayor, I don't. I'd like to make a motion we adopt a budget ordinance amendment for the general capital projects fund.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Odom, seconded by Alderman Astor. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, let's have a roll call, starting with Alderman Odom.
Alderman Odom,
Yes.
Alderman Best,
Yes.
Mayor Outlaw,
Yes.
Alderman Astor,
Yes.
Alderwoman Harris,
Yes.
Alderman Bingle.
Yes.
Motion carries. Item number 12, consider adopting a budget ordinance amendment for the fiscal year 2017-18 general fund operating budget. Does the board have questions?
Yes, I have a question. Is this, I know we discussed this in a prior meeting, but is this an additional 30,000 that you're asking for to be transferred?
Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, but the initial 30,000 towards the garage relocation project fund is for some of the services that have already kind of been rendered for some of the engineering and initial design work for our relocation there. That's correct.
Okay.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt a budget ordinance amendment for the 2017-18 general fund operating budget.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Bingle, seconded by Alderman Harris. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, let's have a roll call, starting with Alderman Bingle.
Alderman Bingle,
Yes?
Alderwoman Harris,
Yes.
Alderman Astor,
Yes.
Mayor Outlaw,
Yes.
Alderman Best,
Yes.
Alderman Odom.
Yes.
Motion carries. Let's go to appointments tonight, starting with Alderman Odom.
Yes, sir, I have three. For HPC to replace the term of Mr. Jim Morrison, I'd like to appoint Mr. George Brake, and his address is 515 Metcalf. If I can get a second.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. You have a?
Yes, sir. I also have the rotation falls to me for another HPC position. I'd like to appoint Dr. Joseph Klotz of 218 Pollock Street.
I'll second that, Mayor.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. The motion carries. Yes, sir.
Last one for the Friends of Fireman Museum. I'd like to reappoint Mr. David Pickens.
I second that, Mayor.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. The motion carries. Do you have more, sir?
That's all, sir. Thank you.
Alderman Best.
Yes, I have one, Mr. Bill Frederick's term on the Fireman Museum Board will expire on April 22nd, 2018, and he is interested in continuing to serve in that capacity, so I would request that the board would keep Bill Fredericks in that position on the Fireman's Museum Board.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. Alderman Astor.
I have one, Mr. Mayor. I would like to appoint Jim Bisbee to the HPC.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. Do you have any more, sir?
I do not. Thank you.
Alderman Harris.
I do have one, but not right now. I have, it's my rotation, so.
Alderman Bingle.
Yes, I have one appointment to the Firemen's Museum. I would like to reappoint Mr. Gary Lingman to that board.
Second.
Well, you have about 3 or 4 seconds. So you must be doing a good job. Did you get who the second was? Did you?
I heard Odom the loudest.
Yeah.
That's fine.
We'll give it to him.
Okay. You have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. At this time, we're going, anybody have any other appointments? Do we miss anybody? At this time, we're going to go to the attorney's report.
Nothing to report tonight, Mayor.
City manager's report.
I have nothing to report tonight, sir.
New business, starting with Alderman Bingley.
Okay. I would like to let everybody know that we're about 48 days away from Paint Your Heart Out, a great event in our community. And just a couple of things I want to mention. Sites were conducted for the homes, and they're working on it now. But what they do need is they need volunteers and they need sponsorships. So I would ask everybody to please contact Landa Gaskins. And Colleen, I know you're in the back. If we can get this on Facebook everybody New Bern Live, if you're out there tonight listening to us, Randy, everybody, if you can get the word out to contact Landa Gaskins at Development Services. She does need volunteers, and she does need some donations and sponsorships. This is a great, great event. If you haven't done this before, you really need to get out there and do it. It's helping people to fix up their homes and really make the community look better. I participated with a group from Swiss Bear last year, and it's just a great thing. They need site coaches for their construction sites. I think I've covered all. Mr. Ruggieri, anything else I need to say on behalf of that? Okay, but I would really appreciate if everybody out there would come together and help them with this. It's a great, great thing going on. And I think that's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alderman Harris.
Mayor, thank you. I just want to remind everyone that April 28th is the Community Health Fair at the Omega Center from 12 to 3. We're going to have a bounce house, whole bunch of stuff, Zumba, food, entertainment, and a lot of the health department's going to be there doing checks and tests and stuff, so just make sure you come out. That's 28th of April, this Saturday, 12 to 3 at the Omega Center.
Anything else?
That's all I got.
Alderman Astor.
I've got a question for the city manager or the finance director, I'm not sure, and you might not know the answer to it right now, but what's the status on our FEMA reimbursements from Hurricane Irene as well as Matthew? Do you have any idea?
I do not at the moment. I will have to follow up on those.
Yeah. Let us get with Lori, and she can do us a full accounting on that, and I can either report back or just get it, I can send it to the full board via email, or if you want me to report back in formal meeting.
I just, I know we've been dealing with Irene for a long time. It's time to resolve that one.
Yeah, that's one that obviously clearly been sticking out there for quite some time. The last I heard, they were trying to get some sort of resolution for us, but I'm not.
And it's been in the insurance department for a long time. I mean, I can certainly make some phone calls if need be, if Lori wants me to, but I know most of those people there, so.
Yeah. Well, I'll touch base with her. She's actually out of town at the
Hey,
moment.
great, thank you. I have nothing else.
Thanks, sir. Alderman Best.
Yes, I just want to say thank you to you, Chief Board, for getting that fire hydrant installed over on Jarvis and I think it was Raleigh Street. I asked you, and you just worked on it so expediently. I appreciate that, and I know the residents over in the area. I've already gotten a phone call. The young lady was thanking me. Also, Mark, Scott, and Mayor, and Alderman Bingle, I just want to say thank you to all of you for helping me with one of my constituents in Ward 5. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to help us try to resolve that matter. Also, I want to give a thank you to all of the city employees, because without our city employees, we could not run this city.
Amen.
So thank you for all of your hard work. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Odom.
Nothing tonight, sir.
Okay, this time, do we need a closed session for anything?
Yes, Mayor, I need you and the board in a brief closed session pursuant to 143-311A3 to maintain our attorney-client privilege to discuss City of New Bern versus Capri Hospitality.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
So moved.
Yep.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, same.